Very good evening to all. Tax பத்தி ஒரு சிம்பிள் எக்ஸாம்பிள் சொல்லும்போது they used to compare it to honey bee, that is ஒரு தேன் எப்படி வந்து டாக்ஸ் கலெக்ட் பண்ணணுமோ அப்படின்றதுதான் வந்து ஒரு பேசிக் எக்ஸாம்பிளா சொல்லுவாங்க. தட் இஸ் ஒரு தேன் வந்து ஒரு பூலேருந்து அதோடைய தேனி வந்து ஒரு தேன் எடுத்தா கூட that strengthens the flower, at the same time it strengthens that bee. So that is the objective of tax also. So even if the tax is collected from the public, it should strengthen the government also. It also should strengthen the person who is paying the tax. So that is the objective. And one of the ways the government has kept is this way of TDS. And rate of tax is also substantially reduced in the last few years. So this all is because there is a sense of trust which is being placed between the taxpayers and the government. So in that direction, the tax department also wants to have more such seminars. So we thank the this program, and especially for Senthil Prabhu IRS for gracing this occasion. Also for all the senior tax officers who are present here. I also welcome the press members vandirukanga. So ரொம்ப நன்றி for covering this program. And also we have the inspectors from the department and also the support assistants from the department has come. I welcome you all for this occasion. Especially this the nation is running on people who are the important people or the taxpayers. So India வந்து ஒரு joint family மாதிரி we run. So we have few percentage people who pay the taxes, and this joint family la வந்து major support is given by people like you who are the businesses, and so we thank and also we welcome you all for this seminar on the TDS. And during the course உங்களுக்கு ஏதாவது doubts, feedbacks, anything, people are here to clarify the doubts, and any further feedbacks at the end we will also collect from you. On this note, I personally welcome you all. Thank you so much.
I welcome all the directors who are present here. And my first thanks to Mr. Srinivasan, who is instrumental in arranging this conference, along with Mr. Sundaraman and Mr. Bharat, and SMCS team. Mr. Srinivasan rightly pointed out the trust factor in the income tax. Initially, நீங்கள் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா முன்னாடி வந்து ஸ்க்ரூட்டனி வந்து நிறைய இருக்கும், பிகாஸ் the same trust factor தான் அதில் issue. Now government is focusing more on TDS, which same way gives more, shows the more maximum trust given by the government to the deductor. Because what you are doing is government ஓட வேலை தான் டிடெக்டர் பண்ண போறீங்க. whatever tax வந்து ஒரு அசசி பே பண்ண வேண்டியதை நீங்க முன்னாடியே புடிச்சு கட்டுறீங்க. That is a faith, great amount of faith and trust given to the deductor. And because of the TDS and the trust given to year on year பாத்தீங்கன்னா tax collection increase ஆகிட்டு இருக்கு, number of return filing increase ஆகிட்டு இருக்கு. The more DDOs and the deductors implement the TDS provision effectively, இதோட impact வந்து இன்னுமே நல்லா இருக்குங்க. TDS result in two things. ஒன்று வந்து end to end. நீங்க வந்து ஒரு இடத்துல ஒருத்தருக்கு பே பண்ணும்போது அவங்க ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்டா இருக்கலாம், அவரு வந்து இன்னொருத்தங்கிட்ட மெட்டீரியல் வாங்கலாம், அவங்க வந்து ஒருத்தங்களுக்கு சேலரி கொடுக்கலாம். இது எல்லாமே லிங்க் ஆகிரும். லைக் ஜிஎஸ்டி இட் ரிசல்ட் இன் எண்ட் டு எண்ட். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஒரு மிகப்பெரிய கார்பரேட்ல ஆரம்பிச்சு ரிசல்ட்டிங் எண்ட் ஒரு சேலரி எம்ப்ளாயி வரைக்கும் இருக்கிற எல்லாத்தோட இன்கமையும் உள்ள கொண்டு வர இட் ஹெல்ப்ஸ். அட் த சேம் டைம் இட் ரெடியூசஸ் த டாக்ஸ் பர்டன். கடைசியா வந்து ஒரு நாள் போய் ஒருத்தர் டாக்ஸ் பே பண்ணோம் அப்படின்னா 1 லட்சமா இருக்கட்டும், 1 கோடியா இருக்கட்டும், இட் புட்ஸ் பர்டன் ஆன் ஹிம். பிகாஸ் ஆஃப் டிடிஎஸ் ஒவ்வொரு தடவை நம்ம இன்கம் ரெசிப்ட் வரும்போது மைனர் ஒரு ஸ்மால் போர்ஷன் வந்து இட் இஸ் கலெக்டட் அஸ் அ டிடிஎஸ், விச் இஸ் வெரி ஹெல்ப்ஃபுல். ஸோ இந்த லாஸ்ட் பேக்கிங்ல வந்து ஒரு பர்டனை வந்து இது ரெடியூஸ் பண்ண இட் இஸ் வெரி ஹெல்ப்ஃபுல். ஜஸ்ட் ஐ வாண்ட் டு ஹைலைட் ஒரு 2 issues ரிகார்டிங் டிடிஎஸ். பர்டிகுலர்லி வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா 194C6 வந்து கான்ட்ராக்ட் பேமெண்ட்ல வெஹிக்கிள் ஓனர்ஸ் மோர் தென் லெஸ் தென் 10 வெஹிக்கிள்ஸ் இருந்தால் அவங்க டிக்ளரேஷன் வாங்கிட்டு டிடிஎஸ் வந்து பிடிக்க தேவையில்லை. ஜஸ்ட் ஐ வாண்ட் டு all you detectors to be little bit careful in this, because ஒரே ஒரு டிடெக்டர் ஒரு வெண்டார்ட்ட வந்து நீங்க இந்த சர்டிபிகேட் வாங்கிக்கிறீங்க அண்ட் யூ ஆர் நாட் டிடக்டிங் டிடிஎஸ். பட் அட் த சேம் டைம் அந்த வெண்டர்ஸோட வெஹிக்கிள் லிஸ்ட் உங்களுக்கு கொடுக்குற மெட்டீரியல் சப்ளை லிஸ்ட் பார்த்தோம்னா வித்தின் அ மந்தே வந்து 10 வெஹிக்கிள்ஸ் மேலேயெல்லாம் நிறைய பேருக்கு இருக்கு. ஜஸ்ட் ஹேவ் சம் காஷன் இன் திஸ். ரொம்ப மேனுவலாக வாங்கிட்டு அது பண்ணோம்னா கொஞ்சம் வந்து அது கேர்ஃபுல்லாக பார்த்தீங்கன்னா நல்லா இருக்கும். இன்னொன்று வந்து ரீசெண்ட் பீரியட்ல வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா தெர் இஸ் ஹையர் ரேட் ஆஃப் டிடக்ஷன் அண்டர் 206 ஏபி. இப்போ ரீசெண்டாக லாஸ்ட் இயருக்கு வந்து இப்போ கரண்ட் இயர்லேருந்து லாஸ்ட் 1 இயர் ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்ணீங்கன்னா யூ ஹேவ் டு டிடக்ட் டிடிஎஸ் அட் ஹையர் ரேட். இந்த ப்ரொவிஷன் நிறைய பேர் வந்து சரியா பண்ண முடியறதில்லை. அது வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா பர்டிகுலராக நிறைய உங்க டேன்ல டிமாண்ட் பார்த்தீங்கன்னாலே ஷார்ட் டிடக்ஷன் வந்து ரீசெண்ட் பாஸ்ட்ல வந்து நிறைய பேருக்கு அதிகமாயிட்டு இருக்கு. We feel only because of one of the reason is இந்த ஹையர் ரேட்ல பிடிக்கிறத வந்து சரியா பண்றது இல்லையோ அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி ஒரு ஒரு இது இருக்கு. ஜஸ்ட் ஸோ ப்ளீஸ் டூ யூஸ் ட்ரேடர் ரேசஸ் போர்ட்டில் இருக்கிற அந்த மாடியூல் பார்த்து ensure that your recipient has filed the return or not. If not, you please start deducting at the higher rate. So without taking much of your time, I want my colleagues to take over and brief you regarding the TDS and new provisions. Whenever, whatever the doubt you have in the middle, please let us know. We are here to clarify. Thank you.
In the TDS Awareness Program, ஏற்பாடு செய்திருந்த TDS மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் கன்சல்டன்சி சர்வீசஸ் குழுமத்தை சேர்ந்த அனைத்து நல்லுள்ளவர்களுக்கும் வருமான வரித்துறையின் சார்பாக என் நெஞ்சார்ந்த நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். மேலும் வரிப்படுத்தம் செய்யும் அலுவலர்கள் வந்திருந்து இந்த விழாவை சேர்த்தமைக்கு மிக்க நன்றி. அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். என்னுடைய பணி 15 minutes தாங்க. I am going to sensitize you on various TDS provisions. நீங்க எல்லாரும் டாக்ஸ் டிடக்டர்ஸ் கோ. ஸோ இன்கம் டேக்ஸ் டிபார்ட்மெண்ட்ல 2 விதமா வரி வசூல் நடைபெறுது. கம்பெனி வந்து ஒரு வருமானம் ஈட்டுது, அதுல 30% டாக்ஸ் போகணும், 25% டாக்ஸ் கேட்கும். இது ஒரு வகையான வருமான வரி. மற்றொரு முக்கியமான நிகழ்வு வருமான வரித்துறையில பொறுப்பு உங்களுக்கு கொடுக்கப்பட்டுள்ளது. அதாவது வருமானத்துக்கு வரிங்கிறது உங்களுக்கு எல்லாருக்கும் தெரியும். பட் நீங்க எல்லாரும் உங்களுடைய நிறுவனத்தின் கீழேயோ இல்ல அச்சீவாவையோ இல்ல ப்ரொப்ரியேட்டரி கம்பெனியாவோ நீங்க நிறைய செலவு செய்யறீங்க. அந்த செலவுக்கு பேரு ஸ்பெசிஃபைட் எக்ஸ்பென்சஸ் வாங்க. ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் சேலரி, இல்லைன்னா ப்ரொஃபஷனல் ஃபீஸ், இல்லைன்னா கான்ட்ராக்ட், இல்லைன்னா ரெண்ட். எந்தெந்த செலவுகள்லாம் வருமான வரி சட்டத்துக்கு கீழே இருக்கோ அது அந்த செலவுக்கு பேரு ஸ்பெசிஃபைட் எக்ஸ்பென்சஸ் பேரு. அந்த ஸ்பெசிஃபைட் எக்ஸ்பென்சஸ் நீங்க பண்ணும்போது நீங்க முடிச்சுக்கணும். யூ ஹேவ் டு டிடக்ட் appropriate tax on your expenditure and you have to pay the deducted amount into the central government account in time. இதோட உங்களுடைய கடமை புரிஞ்சு போவதில்லை. இதை தாண்டி you have to file the ETDS statement, quarterly ETDS statement in time. இந்த அதிக பொறுப்பு டாக்ஸ் டிடக்டர்ஸ் ஆன உங்கள்கிட்ட கவர்மெண்ட் எதிர்பார்க்குது. இதை நீங்க செய்ய தவறினீங்கன்னா வருமான வரி சட்டத்தின் கீழே சாரி ஐ டு சே யூ ஆர் டீம்டு டு பி a default. இதை நீங்க இதுல ஏதாவது ஒரு பணியை செய்ய தவறினா கூட நீங்க அந்த டாக்ஸ் அமௌண்ட்டை கட்ட வேண்டிய நிர்பந்தத்துக்கு தள்ளப்படுகிறீர்கள். So your duty is to deduct tax on your appropriate expenditure at the specified rate first. Then you have to pay the tax into the central government account in time. உங்களுக்கு யாராவது ஒருத்தருக்கு சப்போஸ் we are in July, நீங்க as businessman or as hotelier as real estate businessman நீங்க வந்து ஜூன் மாசம் you have deducted tax towards your so many payments. ஜூன் மாசம் டிடக்ட் பண்ண அமௌண்ட்டை என்னைக்குள்ள கட்டணும்? ஜூலை 7. வெரி குட். அதே மாதிரி ஏப்ரல் மே ஜூன் 3 குவார்டர் முடிஞ்சுட்டு அந்த 3 குவார்டருடைய இடிஎஸ் குவார்டர்லி ரிட்டர்ன் 24Q னா சேலரி, 26Q னா அதர் தன் சேலரி, அதை என்னைக்கு இடிஎஸ் ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்ணணும்? 31 இல்ல ஏப்ரல் மே ஜூன் இந்த 3 மாசத்துக்கான காலாண்டு ஜூலை. ஜூலை 31 நீங்க செய்யறேன்னா என்ன ஆகும்? Not penalty. Per day 200. It is called late filing fee under section 234E. இந்த ஒரு சின்ன முன்னுரையோட நான் என்னோட பிபிடி ஆரம்பிக்கிறேன். எனக்கு கொடுக்கப்பட்டது 15 நிமிஷம் தான், அதுல 5 நிமிஷம் தரவிச்சேன் நான். So TDS complaints due dates கொடுத்திருக்கேன். Other consideration section wise provision for TDS. So in the TDS ல நீங்க எல்லாரும் deductors, since you are deducting tax, இந்த TDS உடைய முக்கியத்துவம் என்னன்னா ரெண்டு விஷயம் தாங்க. நீங்க பண்ற செலவு இருக்குல்ல, அந்த செலவை நீங்க TDS பண்ணுவதன் மூலமாக அது டிஜிட்டலைஸ் செய்யப்படுகிறது. சப்போஸ் நீங்க வந்து 1 கோடி ரூபாய் நீங்க கான்ட்ராக்ட் கொடுத்தீங்கன்னா நீங்க TDS பண்ணலன்னா it will not digitalize. Since you are deducting tax and you are making equaling quarterly statement, somewhere it has got digitalized. So in future, department can go on watching the recipient. That's main idea. One more main concept is upfront collection. Upfront collection to the central government. So நம்மளுடைய வருமானம் வந்து நம்ம கடைசியா தான் நம்ம வருமான வரியை செலுத்துவோம். எவரி மந்த் TDS ஆனா கூட நம்மளுடைய அட்வான்ஸ் டாக்ஸ் பேமெண்ட் ஆகும் சரி, செல்ஃபஸ்மெண்ட் டாக்ஸ்னாலும் நமக்கு வந்து காலம் தாக்கு தான் பே பண்ணுவோம். இந்த TDS மூலமாக அப்ரண்ட் கலெக்ஷன் கவர்மெண்ட் கிடைக்குது. இந்த 2 விஷயம் தாங்க முக்கியமான TDSல எல்லாரும் அதிக படித்த மேதைகள் சொல்லுற விஷயம் 2 விஷயம் தான். ஒண்ணு வந்து டிஜிட்டலைஸ் ஆகுது. Somewhere it has got digitalized. So department can further investigate the recipient income. அவன் சப்போஸ் ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்ணலன்னா I can go beyond him. இன்னொரு விஷயம் அப்ரண்ட் கலெக்ஷன். ஸோ இந்த 2 விஷயம் தான் TDS உடைய முக்கியத்துவம். ஸோ நீங்க TDS பண்ணதுனால நீங்க எல்லாம் டிடெக்டார். சப்போஸ் உங்களுடைய ரிசிபியன்ட் வந்து டிடெக்டிவ். TDS is a tool used by the government to minimize tax evasion. இந்த tax evasion நான் இன்டைரக்டா சொன்னேன் நான். It has got digitalized. So நான் நாளைக்கு வந்து as an income tax man I can go beyond that person who has received 1 crore amount from you. அவன் நாளைக்கு ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்ணலனா I can issue a notice to him. What about minimum? See, contract payment you are deducting only 2%. So he is earning 1 crore. Suppose after deducting his expenditure, he is liable for some lakh amount. So you are deducting only 2 lakh. That is why TDS is very very important. And டிடெக்டார்ஸுக்கு உங்களுக்கு நிறைய கடமைகள் இருக்குங்க. தயவு செய்து உங்களுடைய மற்ற வேலை மத்தியில TDSக்குன்னு ஒரு சிறப்பான ஒரு முக்கியத்துவம் கொடுங்க. TDS நீங்க முக்கியத்துவம் தரலைன்னா டிபார்ட்மெண்ட் will come to you. So I find it in so many times there are outstanding demand in traces. நீங்க எல்லாரும் இங்க டிடெக்டார்ஸ், பிரைமரி டிடெக்டார், உங்களுடைய traces அக்கௌண்ட நீங்க ஒரு வாட்டி பார்த்திருக்கீங்களா? ட்ரேசஸ் பிளாட்ஃபார்ம் ஒரு தடவை பார்த்துருக்கீங்களா? அதுல ஏதாவது அவுட்ஸ்டாண்டிங் டிமாண்ட் இருக்கா? அதை நீங்க ரெடியூஸ் பண்றதுக்கான முயற்சியில் ஈடுபட்டீங்களா? ஏன் அவுட்ஸ்டாண்டிங் டிமாண்ட் இருக்குங்கிறத யோசிச்சீங்களா? இட் மே பி ஷார்ட் பேமெண்ட், இட் மே பி ஷார்ட் டிடக்ஷன், ஆர் இட் மே பி டிமாண்ட் ரைஸ்டு பை த டிபார்ட்மெண்ட். அது யாராவது தயவு செய்து அதை வந்து ப்ளீஸ் ஃபோக்கஸ் ஆன் யுவர் ட்ரேசஸ் டிமாண்ட் அண்ட் try to reduce the demand. Otherwise you have to pay. Either you have to reduce or you have to pay the outstanding demand available in your traces portal. So you have to deduct on salary, interest, rent, brokerage, professional service, etc. The deductor is required to remit the tax into the account of the central government, and the deductee would be entitled to get credit of the amount deposited on his behalf. Next page. So complaints due dates for government on the same day. Other deductors I already told 7th of the next month. For March only it is 30th April. Next page. So quarterly payments of TDS. Quarterly dates for quarterly payment would be 7th of the next quarter. Next. I already told salary 24Q. Other than salary 26Q. If it is a NRI, it is 27Q. Next. So these are all the due dates. I have already told April, May, June 31st July. So the 31st July ETDS quarterly return போடலன்னா every day you have to pay 200 rupees as late filing fee under section 234E. So இத வெயிட் பண்றதுக்கு டிபார்ட்மென்ட்ல யாருக்குமே அதிகாரம் இல்ல. So if demand is raised under section 234E, then you have to pay. So please concentrate on filing the ETDS quarterly statement in time. Next. So you have to, after direction of tax, you have to issue certificate like form number 16, form number 68 to the directee in time, as specified in the income tax act. Next. So if you file the ETDS statement, if you find any mistakes, then you can file a correction statement. So you are eligible to file any number of correction statement on the original return you file. See 234E. It's a very, very sensitive issue. Please don't take chance. Please file all the quarterly returns, whether it is 24Q or 27Q or 26Q in time. Otherwise, 200 rupees per day, maximum amount will be the TDS amount shown in the ETDS quarterly return. It cannot be beyond more than that amount. 234E per day 200. Suppose if the TDS statements you are mentioning only 1 lakh rupees as TDS, so 234E will not go beyond 1 lakh. Next. Is mandatory requirement for furnishing PAN. So you have to obtain PAN from the deductee. Next. These are all very common issues. You have to link to your PAN with Aadhaar. Otherwise, liable for pay fees rupees 1000 rupees. Next. See, this is very, very important. This 192(1)A. Any person, including principal officer of the company, who is required to deduct tax at source, or being an employer who opts for payment of tax under section 192(1)A does not deduct or pay the tax, such person shall be deemed to be assessee in default. Suppose நீங்க வரி பிடித்தம் செய்ய தவறினால் நீங்க அந்த வரியை கட்டணும். On behalf of your deductee, you will be deemed to be assessee in default. எல்லாம் புரிஞ்சுக்கிட்டேன்னு நினைக்கிறேன். நீங்க TDS பண்ணல, சப்போஸ் உங்க ஹோட்டல்ல ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்ட் கொடுக்குறீங்க, சப்போஸ் 1 லட்சம் ரூபாய் கொடுத்தீங்கன்னா அதுக்கு அப்ராப்ரியேட் டேட்ல TDS நீங்க செய்து அதை காலத்தே கவர்மெண்ட் அக்கௌண்ட்ல செலுத்தி காலத்தே குவார்டர்லி TDS ரிட்டர்ன் போடணும். அப்படி போடலைன்னா you are deemed to be a assessee in default. சப்போஸ் 1 லட்சம் ரூபாய் கான்ட்ராக்ட்னா 2% 2000 ரூபாய் நீங்க you have to pay from your packet. அதுதான் TDS உடைய முக்கியத்துவம். as deductor உங்களுக்கு நிறைய கடமைகள் இருக்கு. நீங்க தெரிய சொல்லக்கூடாது. you have to watch. I can say நீங்க ஒவ்வொரு செலவு செய்யும் போதும் ஒரே ஒரு விஷயத்தை ஞாபகத்துல வச்சுக்கோங்க. இதுக்கு TDS வருமா? You please ask your CA. இதுக்கு TDS வருமா? இந்த பேமெண்ட் பண்றேன். நீங்க ஒரு ஹோட்டல்ல ஒரு எத்தனையோ விதமான செலவு பண்ணுவீங்க. உங்களுடைய பிசினஸ் ஆக்டிவிட்டியில நிறைய செலவு வரும். ஒவ்வொரு செலவு செய்யும் போதும் தயவு செய்து இதுக்கு TDS வருமா? ஏன்னா எல்லா எக்ஸ்பெண்டிச்சருமே மோஸ்ட்லி கவர்ட் அண்டர் TDS. மோஸ்ட்லி 99% எக்ஸ்பெண்டிச்சர் இஸ் கமிங் அண்டர் TDS. ஸோ ஒவ்வொரு செலவு செய்யும் போதும் ஒவ்வொரு முதலீடு செய்யும் போதும், ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் இப்போ 194Q வந்துருக்கு, நீங்க பர்ச்சேஸ் பண்ணீங்கன்னா TDS பண்ணணும். தெரியுமா? அது 194Qன்னு ஒரு செக்ஷன்ல 50 லட்சம் ரூபாய்க்கு மேல ஒரு வெண்டார்ட்ட இருந்து நீங்க பர்ச்சேஸ் பண்ணீங்கன்னா you have to deduct tax. Suppose நீங்க அத if you fail, you are becoming assessee in default. So when you are making any payment, please consider whether it is subject to tax. If so, you please deduct appropriate tax. So interest, suppose if you deduct tax, beyond the due date you are paying into the central government account, what will happen? So you have to pay interest. So there are two kinds of interest. One is if you deducted but not paid 1.5% per month. You are not at all deducted. Subsequently you are deducted. Then the late payment for interest for late payment is 1%. Please understand, if you are deducted, it is very sensitive. It is government money. If you are deducted, it is government money. You should not keep the money with you beyond the stipulated time. You have to pay into the central government account. Otherwise, 1.5% will be charged. If you are not at all deducted for one expenditure, subsequently you find out. பின்னாடி ஐயோ நான் வந்து அதுக்கு அடுத்த பேமெண்ட்டுக்கு வேண்டா இருக்கு போன தடவை நான் பண்ணல இந்த தடவை சேர்த்து பண்ணிருக்கேன்னு சொன்னீங்கன்னா அதுக்கு வந்து 1% தான் இருக்கு ஃபார் த டிலே இன் மேக்கிங் தி பேமெண்ட். புரிஞ்சுனீங்களா? எனி டவுட் between the two difference 1.5% and 1%? New section, as my DCs are told, there are 206 AB section introduced. First you have to look out. I think in your cases portal there is one mechanism. Suppose நீங்க உங்களுடைய வெண்டர்ஸ் ஒரு 100 பேர் 200 பேர் இருக்காங்கன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்களேன், அவங்களுடைய பேன் எல்லாத்தையும் உள்ள ஒன் ஸ்ட்ரோக் உள்ள தள்ளி விடலாம். அவங்களுடைய பேனை மட்டும் சிவிவி ஃபைல்ல ஜாமிங் மேடம் சொல்லுவாங்க, ஜிபிவி ஃபைல்ல வந்து நீங்க வெண்டருடைய பேனை மட்டும் டைப் பண்ணி உங்களுடைய ட்ரேசஸ் போர்ட்டல்ல உள்ள தள்ளிட்டீங்கன்னா யாரெல்லாம் ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்ணலன்னா இட் வில் டெல் யூ. யார் உங்களுடைய வெண்டர்ஸ் யாரெல்லாம் அவங்களுடைய பர்சனல் ரிட்டர்னை ஃபைல் பண்ணலங்கிற விஷயத்தை ட்ரேசஸ் வில் டெல் யூ. ஃபார் தோஸ் பர்சன்ஸ் யூ ஹேவ் டு டிடக்ட் ஹையர் ரேட் ஆஃப் டாக்ஸ். அதான் 206 AB. உங்களுடைய வெண்டர் இருக்கார்ல, அவர் லாஸ்ட் இயர் ரிட்டர்ன் வந்து இப்ப 31 ஜூலை வந்து இண்டிவிஜுவல் முடிய போகுது. 44 AB என்டிட்டிக்கு டியூ டேட் இஸ் 31 ஜூலை. சப்போஸ் உங்களுடைய வெண்டர் வந்து 44 AB என்டிட்டி அவர் வந்து 31 ஜூலைக்குள்ள ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்ணல, ஆகஸ்ட் மாசம் நீங்க ஒரு கான்ட்ராக்ட் பேமெண்ட் ஒரு 5 லட்சம் கொடுக்குறீங்க. At what rate you have to deduct tax? For contract, what is the specified rate? 2%. Suppose your vendor has not filed the return till 31st July. You are making one payment on 1st August. What is the rate you have to deduct tax on such contract payment? 5%. Very good. You please remember, my DCs are already told all the demand raised only, majority of the demand is nowadays is raised only due to this mistake. So first you go and formulate your vendor's plan, and it can be put into traces portal, and you can verify who are all non-filers. For non-44 AB entity, 31st July. For 44 AB entity, it may be 30th October ago. So after October, you have to be very careful. So you have to watch the due date for filing the return of income. And if your vendor has not filed the return of income, you have to deduct tax on higher rate. Otherwise, you will be deemed to be default. And the percentage இருக்குல்ல, இப்ப 2% பிடிக்கிற இடத்துல நீங்க 5% பிடிக்கணும். சப்போஸ் பிடிக்கலன்னா அந்த 3% வந்து உங்களுக்கு டிமாண்டா வந்து டேக்ஸ் ஃப்ளோ ஆகும். I don't know, nobody is having the power to reduce the demand, you have to pay. As and when the vendor is filing the return, so நீங்க வந்து அந்த பேனல் காமிக்காது. அந்த மாதிரி சிஸ்டம் மெக்கானிசம் பண்ணிருக்காங்க. இந்த டிடெக்டிவ் வந்து ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்றாங்க. சப்போஸ் 31st ஜூலை வந்து டியூ டேட், 31st ஜூலை பண்ணலன்னா you have to deduct on higher rate from August. So அவன் செப்டம்பர் ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்ணிட்டான், அக்டோபர் நீங்க கொடுக்குற பேமெண்ட்டுக்கு நீங்க 2% பண்ணா போதும். Understand? After filing the return, you need not deduct tax on the higher rate. Next. See, suppose if your deductee is asking or is submitting some 197 certificate obtained from the income tax department, then in that case you need not deduct tax. யாருக்காவது தெரியுமா அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு ஆப்ஷன் இருக்குன்னு? But you please digitalize those data in your 26Q. அது எல்லாருக்கும் தெரியும். நீங்க எல்லாருமே நீங்க டிம் ஃபெசிலிட்டேட்டர் மூலமா தான ரிட்டர்ன் ஃபைல் பண்றீங்க. You have to give those data also. Wherever one vendor is assigned 197 certificate and அவங்க உங்கள்ட்ட அந்த சர்டிபிகேட் கொடுத்தாங்கன்னா நீங்க you need not deduct tax. But however, you have to give the data to your TDS facilitator to digitalize. இந்த கேஸ்ல இந்த டிடெக்டிவ் 1 லட்சம் கான்ட்ராக்ட் வாங்கினாப்ல, ஆனா வந்து டிடிஎஸ் பண்ண செய்யல. அந்த 197 சர்டிபிகேட் நம்பர் நீங்க நம்பர் கொடுக்கணும். While you are filing 26Q, you have to record the data. Next. The dividends 10%. Next. Interest on other than interest on securities. 194A. Please be careful. Whenever you are making interest payment, you have to deduct tax. If your vendor is not filed the return, you have to deduct on higher rate. Next. 194B, BB, winning lottery. This are not very common. Next. 194C. 194C is very, very sensitive for you. You may pay more contract to so many vendors. You please be careful. You have to deduct appropriate tax on your payment. Next. Subcontractor. This and all. Next. 194D, insurance commission. Next. 194DA. Next. 194E, foreign payments, sports association. Next. 194H. Very, very important for you. You are doing business now. If you are making commission or brokerage, you please go through and you must be very careful before paying the amount. You have to deduct tax. Rent also, you business people will do make payment. Rent, you have to deduct tax at appropriate rate. Next. Purchase of land or building, individual concept, not in business. Next. 194 IB is also individual, not relating to business. Next. 184 IC is the business. So you people will have some agreement. So 194C will apply. Any real estate director has come in this forum? Any real estate director? Not told some real estate director has come, but nobody is here. So for real estate business, 194 IA will come. 194 IC will come. Next. 194J, professional fee. Lawyer fees, 194J. Any professional fees will come under 194J. Next. These are all personal oriented. 194M. Next. 194N. Please don't withdraw cash more than 1 crore. If you withdraw cash more than 1 crore, the bank will deduct tax. So minimize cash transaction. Please do all transactions only through digital media. Minimize the cash transaction. Don't withdraw cash more than 1 crore in a financial year. 194. Any e-commerce operator, now the new section, the e-commerce operator has to deduct tax. Any business person here doing sale through e-commerce operator? Are you aware of that e-commerce operator like Amazon, Flipkart? Suppose if Flipkart is selling your product, then Flipkart will deduct tax on your payment by the Flipkart. It is called 194O. Flipkart will deduct tax on the payment made to you. Yeah, you are selling through e-commerce operator. So he will repay you now. Then that e-commerce operator will deduct tax. New introduction section 194O. Next. 194B senior citizen. Next. 194Q I told now purchase. Please be careful. Yeah. Purchase of goods into capital goods. Here, Act is telling buyer who is responsible for paying any sum to any resident seller for purchase of goods of the value. What is your grievance? Purchase of goods into capital goods also. Yeah. Act does not differentiate between capital goods and revenue goods. You purchase capital goods, if it exceeds the threshold limit of 50 lakhs, you have to deduct tax. 194R. This is very, very interesting section, recently introduced. If you are extending any perquisite to a businessman, please be careful. If you are extending any benefit to a businessman, please be careful. You have to deduct tax. சப்போஸ் யாரோ ஒருத்தர் உங்களுடைய லாயர் வந்து உங்களுக்கு சிறப்பான சேவை செய்வதற்கு லண்டன்ல ஏதோ ஒரு டிக்கெட் வாங்கி கொடுக்குறீங்க, ஏதோ ஒரு டிக்கெட் மேட்சுக்கு, சே ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் 3 lakh ஒர்த். மணி ஆர் மணி இஸ் வேல்யூங்கிறான். நீங்க பேமெண்ட் கேஷா பண்ணாலும் சரி, இல்ல மணி இஸ் ஒர்த். 3 lakh உங்க லாயருக்கு வந்து ஒரு கிஃப்ட் கொடுக்குறீங்க, டிக்கெட் வாங்கி தரீங்க, யூ டிடெக்ட் டாக்ஸ். இட் இஸ் கமிங் அண்டர் 194R. 194 is very, very sensitive section. That is transfer of virtual digital assets. VDA. Next. So TDS and salary shall I explain? Otherwise, shall I give time to the technical group? What do you want? Salary you want to be sensitized? Salary you want to be sensitized or not? Shall I skip? Salary is very, very common here. Whenever you are making payment, you have to deduct tax. So you have to obtain 12 BB from your employee. So 12 BB may be the self-declaration filed by the employee to you. What are all these investment for ETC, the HRA exemption? So you please go through 12 BB. You obtain 12 BB from every employee of your concern. That ends the matter. See, this is a new section as my DCs are told, 206 KB. 206 KB is relating to TDS. 206 CCA is relating to TCA. So technically we will call deductor, collector. So you are all deductor and collector. Whoever the person receiving the money is called the recipient. So all are statutory payments. Statutory payments means salary, rent, provision fees, contract. Next. So preliminary verification you have to do. Whenever you are making some payment, because of 206 KB, you must be very careful. You have to do the preliminary verification. Mr. R, recipient, is having TDS or TDS rate of 50,000 or above. This is all very, very vital. First, உங்களுடைய வெண்டார லாஸ்ட் இயர் அவருடைய பர்சனல் கெப்பாசிட்டியில டிடிஎஸ் எவ்வளவு பார்க்கும். சப்போஸ் இட் exceeds 50,000, so your work starts. If it is less than 50,000, leave it. If it is more than 50,000, go to next thing. Then if it fails, AB will not apply. If he passes, qualifies for main verification. First verification, you have to go through how much amount he was having as TDS TCS credit. If it is 50,000, if it is less than 50,000, leave it. If it is 50,000 or above, that vendor is eligible for main verification. Preliminary verification over, main verification. So suppose this is very crucial. If the vendor is filed the return under the section 139(1), if he fails, 206 AB will be applicable. If he passes, no higher rate of deduction. That's all. Thank you. Thank you all.
Enlighten some important things to be taken care while preparing the statement and using the functionalities in the pages portal, and the reasons for and the process for generating of documents. These things I'm going to bring you. So you may use many software, isn't it? How many of you are using NSDL software and how many of you are using private software by paying some cost? Are you anybody using NSDL software for preparing EPS return? Okay. Any software we can use for preparing EPS statements. Okay. Only thing deductor has to ensure that whatever transactions we do in every quarter, are we reporting correctly in the statement or not? Because in the, we all know that TDS return will be filed on quarterly basis. We have two types of statements. TDS tax deducted at source and tax collection at source. Okay, for TDS we have three types of statements we prepare. salary, other than salary, and 24Q, 26Q, 27Q. So these forms are all relevant to which transactions or whatever transactions we do under salary, we'll report the data in 24Q. And other than salary, like many payments we make through make for contract, professional or rent, whatever sections we have seen here. So these data are to be reported in Form 26Q regularly. Any payments we make to an NRI in form of salary or remuneration, royalty, long-term capital gain or interest, whatever transactions we make to an NRI, those details are to be reported in 27Q. We should not shuffle these transactions because 26Q is only for Indian residents. So any payments we make to an NRI not to be shown in 26Q. Here, this is TDS. You know the due dates and all. Every quarter we have a due date called 31st July, 31st October, 31st January, and 31st May. We have to comply TDS return. And TCS, are you doing it TCS transactions? Like taking tenders, like scrap transactions? Okay. If you do any transactions with respect to TCS, then there is a separate form called 27EQ. Any transactions you do under TCS, tax collection and so, these transactions are to be reported in 27EQ. The due dates for filing these statements are 15th of every quarter. So for TDS, we'll file the return on 31st of the due dates. For TCS, we have to comply 15th of every quarter. Like for July, first of quarter, we have to file 27EQ statement on 15th of July, 15th of October, 15th of January, and 15th of May. So when we fail to file TDS return within these due dates, what happens? Section 234E will be levied. So in order to avoid the 234E, one should file TDS return within the due date to avoid the 200 rupees per day late fee levy. Clear? And after filing, deductor's responsibility is we'll deduct TDS and we have to remit before the due date, 7th of subsequent months. We have to file EPS return on quarterly basis, and finally we have to issue relevant certificates for the deductees and employees. For that too also we have due dates. We have seen that. Make sure that Form 16 or 16A are generated well in advance from the Traces portal. Okay. So these are the filing. And secondly, I would like to update the functionalities and facilities available in the Traces portal. How many of you are using Traces portal? So all are using Traces portal. So we have many facilities in Traces portal. I would like to show that. So we have many facilities in Traces portal. So I am request every deductor to check your TAN in the Traces portal whether the TAN is having any demands or not. If you find any demands under your TAN, make necessary action to close the demands. Because you don't wait for the demand until you receive the demand notice from the Traces or the income tax department, because it is readily available. If the demand raised for the particular TAN, it is available in your Traces account. You can verify under dashboard. When the deductor clicks on dashboard, it reflects the outstanding demand available across all financial years will be reflected in your Traces account. If you find any demand, please take initiative to close the demand. And also, deductors can verify their statement once they file. After filing your statement, are you verifying the status in the Traces portal? Or until you wait, you receive any intimations from the department or Traces? So we have to, the deductor has to verify regularly the status of the return in the Traces portal under statement status. Okay, when the statement is processed without default, then there is no any issue. You can go for making a request for Form 16 or 16A. If you find that your statement has any defects in the return, like process with default, what the deductor has to do, they have to make request for the justification report under defaults in order to verify what for the demands have been raised. Okay, demands may be raised on various heads like short deduction, short payment, interest on late payment, or late filing. So whatever the demands may be, The same can be verified under defaults, under view default summary. If you want detailed report to find out which entry got defected, that can be seen in the request for justification request. So whatever demands you have, make request for justification report, what for the demand were raised. Okay, these facilities are available in the traces portal. And if you want to make any statement, if you want to make any correction statement or revised statement, how will you do? Will you file regular return again? No, because regular return can be filed only once in a quarter. Okay, for the particular form. If you want to make any correction or revised statement to be revised, then the director has to make request for the console file under statement or payments. Request for console file. Because in the console file only, deductor can do any changes in the statement. So that facility is also available in the traces portal. And also, I would like to ensure that before you prepare your TDS return, kindly check PAN of the employee and deductees, because PAN can be corrected up to 2 character and 2 numeric. When you make any mistake publishing PAN in the statement, deductor can correct PAN in the statement up to 2 character and 2 numeric without making any additional fees, without making any additional demand amount for the particular statement. If you make more than, if you make mistakes more than 2 character or 2 numeric, what happens? Deductors can correct the PAN, but the demand will not go off from your PAN account. You have to pay the demand amount for making the defect in the statement by furnishing the incorrect PAN. So one should verify whether they are furnishing valid PAN in the statement or not. Okay. So that too can be verified under traces by making a request for a bulk PAN request in the traces portal. And other major function, validate your lower reduction certificate. Are you verifying this lower reduction certificate? Because government has given a facility to verify the 197 certificate. You don't allow any 197 certificate for the deductees without verifying the certificate under your traces account. Because when your deductee gets any 197 certificate from the income tax, the same will be reflected in your traces TAN account. If the validation passes, it shows up to which amount we can provide, up to which amount we can give exemption and the nature of payment for which we may deduct. So these things all can be viewed in 197 certificate validation. If the validation passes, you allow that 197 certificate up to the limit. If it fails, don't allow the lower reduction certificate. Okay. So these things can be verified here. And that said, for transporters, declarations they are providing for non-deduction of tax TDS, especially for contractors. If you receive any declaration from the transporters, what we have to do as a deductor, we'll file an TDS return. Ultimately, we have to show that declaration under your traces account, under declaration to deposit lower period. If you receive any declaration from the transporter, in that case, the declarations are to be reported under your traces portal, and additional facilities are here. And if you make any excess payment in a challan, you may don't have any demands in your traces TAN account. In that case, if you make any excess payment in the challan, that too can be get refunded under request for refund. So this facility we may avail if we make any excess payment while remitting TDS amount. So that facilities are available here. And if there is no any transaction during a quarter, in that case we may have to give declaration under declaration for non-filing of TDS return because it is advisable, or else you will receive any notice from the income tax department asking for justification why you have not filed TDS return for the particular quarter. That declaration also can be given in the traces portal. And the online corrections, if you want to add any challan to the statement, in that cases deductor can use request for correction option under traces portal for adding challan with respect to any interest on late payment or late filing. If you make any late filing payment, that too can be added by filing request for correction statement. These facilities are available here. And if you have digital signature without passing KYC in the traces portal, only thing director has to register his digital signature in the profile part. Once he registers his digital signature in the profile part, every activities can be availed using digital signature without passing any KYC. Because DSC plays a major role in traces as well as in the income tax portal also. For uploading, many may approach PIN facilitator, isn't it? So without approaching PIN facilitator also, directly we can upload TDS return under incometax.gov.in using digital signature. How many of you are using? So digital signature plays a vital role on income tax side as well as traces portal. Once you have digital signature, you don't pass any KYC in the traces portal. Only thing, register your DSC and use all the activities in the traces portal. In Form 16, 16A, transaction based report. How many of you are generating transaction based report? It is only applicable for the NRA. If we do any transactions to an NRA, if the NRA doesn't have PAN, in that case, we may issue transaction based report to the NRA. It is only for the person outside India, person resident outside India. It is not applicable for the Indian resident, because for Indian resident, PAN is mandatory. So without PAN, we cannot issue Form 16. Form 16A is mandatory for furnishing for issuing PAN is mandatory for issuing Form 16 or 16A. So transaction based report is for NRA only. Any transactions you do under tax collection and source, for that case also we have a separate certificate called Form 27B. So what if you do any TCS transaction, for that case also we have to make request for Form 27B, and the same has to be issued to the collect. Clear? So these facilities are available under Traces portal. Any complications you face in Traces portal or facing any difficulties in reporting correction statement, if so, you can ask me and here to explain how to address that demands and all. Okay. So these are the major facilities available in the Traces portal. Okay. So demands can be verified under Traces portal. I said when you click dashboard, list all the demands available under your tab on financial year wise. You can see here under view default summary. You can verify the detailed report what for the demand were raised. 190 certificate validation. You can check in the Traces portal. It shows you the threshold limit valid to, from and to, under which section, tax rate to be deducted. So these things can all be verified under the Traces under 197 certificate validation. So making a request for Form 16 is this procedure. KYC is nothing but if deductor doesn't have digital signature, then the deductor has to follow all this KYC for any activities he does in the Traces portal. Clear? If we have digital signature, we can ignore these procedures or steps. So that when we generate certificate from Traces portal, it displays like that, displays like this. And one thing we have to ensure that before we issue certificate to the employee or deductee, we have to verify the certificate status of booking, whether it is F or other than F. If you find any booking mark as O or U, what the director has to do? They have to reconcile their statement what for the remark as marked as URO, because URO is marked only in the case of mismatch of challan or overbooked of challan. Okay. So when you issue that any certificate to your deductee or employee, the status of booking should be F. It is final. These things have to be taken care. And finally, causes for generation of demand. Why demands are being generated? figures quoting of invalid PAN in the statement. You all know in 2010 CBT notification, when deductor furnishes invalid PAN in the statement, when the deductee fails to furnish valid PAN during the time of making payment, the deductor has to deduct 20%. If the deductor fails to deduct 20%, what happens? Later on, demand notice will be issued under stating invalid PAN. Who will be held responsible for this transaction? Ultimately, deductor will be held responsible. So, when the time of making payment, make sure that you are collecting valid PAN from the employee or deductee. Because of this reason, demand can raise. And secondly, challan mismatch, short payment we may raise, we may receive short payment demands. That is because of quoting of incorrect particulars of the challans or claiming more than the challan amount. Because of that reason, short payment we may receive. And thirdly, 197 certificate validation fails. Without verifying 197 certificate, deductor does not allow lower exemption or no deduction certificate. The deductor fails to verify 197 certificate under prices portal, then demand get raised under 197 certificate validation fails, stating short deduction. And short deduction, other reason. You all know that we have various sections with various tax rates. When we take 194C, we have two types of tax rate, isn't it? 1% and 2%. You all know that 1% is for individual and HUF. Other than individual and HUF, how much we will deduct? 2%. Without, how will you verify whether the person is an individual or HUF or other than individual or HUF? By verifying PAN. When we fail to verify that PAN, what happens? Without verifying the PAN, simply we are hearing that he's saying I'm individual, but he's having firm PAN. Both characters are having firm PAN and we are deducting only 1%. What happens? Short deduction will be raised under failure to deduct tax at applicable rate. So, like contract, we have the same type of tax rates and rent also. We have 2%, 10%. And when we take professional payments, it's 2% and 10%. So, while furnishing TDS statement, we should ensure that we are furnishing proper nature of payment and its section code in the statement. When we make error in furnishing section code, what happens? Short deductions due to calculation of tax rate and tax liability. When it fails, what happens? Demand will get raised because of incorrect quoting of incorrect nature of payments. And late remittance and late payment. So when the late payment will arise? When we fail to deposit the tax within the due date, late payment will be raised. Late remittance, late interest on late deduction. When it raised, when there is a difference between the date of payment and the date of deduction, interest on late deduction will be levied. And finally, late fee. When we fail to file TDS return within the due date, what happens? 200 per day under section 234E will be levied. So I request everyone to comply all these things before you publish your TDS return.
Give me the opportunity to present on this. So Rajaram sir has actually explained you the various provisions of the TDS withholding taxes which are applicable to an employee. So what I will do is I'll just take on these 4 sections, the 5 sections as this, which was introduced to the last 3 in Finance Act. So that is Finance Act 2020, 21 and the latest Finance Act, which involves section 194 R and 194. So as you can see, the last 3-4 years, both the central government as well as the working to widen the tax base, to bring in more associates into the tax family. So this is evident from all the new amendments and insertion of new sections in the Income Tax Act. So one of the examples is section 194N, which actually tracks those people who withdraw a lot of cash expenses, incur cash expenses. So to bring those people into the ambit, they have brought in this new section, and the section was amended in the Finance Act 2020. So section 194N, it talks about TDS on cash withdrawal. So where any person withdraws cash from specified person, where the amount exceeds the limit specified in the Act, the tax deduction at the rate of 2% is done under the Income Tax Act. So here the director is the person who is responsible for the deduction is a banking company, a post office, or a cooperative society which engages in banking business. So these are the three directors who are responsible for deducting the tax expense. So here what happens is whenever we withdraw money from banks and this financial institution, the bank they have the threshold limit of 1 crore. So any amount which exceeds this 1 crore, then TDS will be deducted at 2%. Okay. So here what happened is the section got amended and then they have introduced one another section to bring in more people into the standard. So what that happened is where an associate or an individual who has not filed any or all the returns in the previous 3 financial years, that is the previous assessment year, for which the due date is expired. In those cases, what the department has done is they have reduced the threshold. So the threshold limit is 20 lakhs for those who have not filed any or all the returns in the last 3 financial years. So here the threshold, the tax rate is 2% for those who are wherein the transaction exceeds 20 lakhs up to 1 crore, and where it exceeds 1 crore, then it will be taxed at 5%. So here the section 204, 206 AA will be applicable wherein the recipient, that cash withdrawal does not have a PAN number. So the rate of deduction will be a higher rate of 20% that you have to keep in hold. So section 206A specifically gives benefit only for section 194O and 194Q. So any transaction which is not under this particular section, then the higher rate of tax, that is 20%, or the rates in force will have to be deducted on the transaction. So hence where the person who withdraws the money doesn't have a PAN, then it is a higher percentage of 20%. So this deductor has to pay the tax at the time of payment of that amount. So this is section 194. Then to whom these sections are not applicable, the provisions of this particular section 194N is not where the person who withdraws the money is a central government or state government, a banking company or a cooperative society engaged in banking business, or a post office. Also, they have included the business connection, that is wherein the business correspondence of a banking company, that is those who are actually the agents of the bank who take the banking operations other than the places where the banks are located, as well as white label ATM operators. So these people are also the agents of the bank who operate the ATMs other than the banking locations. So for these people, this particular section is not applicable. So then we'll move on to the next one, the interesting section, section 194O. So during this last few years, like the last 5 to 6 years, there has been increase in this e-commerce operations. So to widen and the same thing to deepen the tax base, what the operation has done is the department has brought in this 194O, which is effective from 1st October 2020. What happens is, so the main purpose of bringing this provision is generally a person who maintains and facilitates the e-commerce will be a well-established person and will be having a proper accounting base and other things. But the sellers who use the platform are not easily traceable. So the main reason why this section was brought in is to capture those people who are actually doing business but who does not have a proper setup to maintain the books. So to bring in those people into this tax base, this section has been introduced. So how this section operates is the section says any payment made by an e-commerce operator for the purpose of any sale of goods or service or both to an e-commerce participant, then tax is to be deducted. So here the main question is, who is an e-commerce operator? So an e-commerce operator is the one who owns, maintains and facilitates e-commerce operations. So it can be an e-commerce site or a facility wherein the e-commerce participants they enter into transaction with the ultimate buyers. So that is e-commerce operator. E-commerce participants are those sellers who use the e-commerce operator facility to do the trade transaction using the e-commerce facility. So here what happens is, so when an e-commerce operator pays to the e-commerce participants, it is his liability to deduct 1% TDS on the gross price. So here gross value means value which is before the GST part, that's the taxable value. So you should not take the taxable GST portion into it. Another thing is, usually what happens is the e-commerce operators, they deduct a commission from the e-commerce participants. So this commission should not be deducted for the purpose of arriving at the tax value. So it is the gross value of the sale that has to be considered. Same way, section 194O, there are two other sections which are interlinked to this. One is section 206AA, which was explained to you by Rajaraman, as well as section 206AB. So 206AA talks about those who doesn't have a PAN number, and 206AB is for penalizing those who are not filing their returns regularly. So in section 206AA, they have given a specific exemption that, not the exemption, they have limited the penalty rate as 5% instead of 20%. So maximum TDS rate where there is no PAN case, it is 5%. And section 206AB, there is no such thing. The maximum rate where the value is less than 5% is minimum 5%. So both in 206AA as well as in 206AB, the same 5% is the deduction rate. Otherwise, section 206AA or 206AB, you have to consider whichever is higher rate. So in case in section 194N, you cannot say it is 5% because 206AA it says the maximum rate is 20%. So where in those cases you have to be very careful in arriving at the TDS rates. So here what happens is you have to deduct 1% in case of the total loss. There is no threshold limit as such, but you have a threshold limit for individuals and HUFs who does transactions up to 5 lakhs in a financial year. So if an individual and if a transaction is between the e-commerce operator and an individual, then you have to see a threshold limit of 5 lakhs of the total purchase of sale of goods or services or both. So the threshold limit applies only for an individual and HUF, and they have to mandatorily provide their PAN number and Aadhaar card. So that is, these are the two things which you have to keep in mind. In all other cases, there is no threshold limit for section 194O, and 194O is applicable even if the ultimate buyer is not a resident in India. Even if it's a foreign person who is using this site and getting the purchasing the material, the e-commerce operator has to deduct TDS out to the e-commerce participant. But what happens when the e-commerce participant is a non-resident? When the e-commerce participant is a non-resident, this section will not be applicable. Section 195 will take over, and you have to see the various DTA provisions and get into the actual tax liability. So this is it. Next, we will move on to section 194Q, which made a huge impact and which has brought in a lot of things to traders and this thing. So this 194Q was brought into effective from 1st July 2021. So wherein the person who is paying any amount to a resident seller has to deduct TDS at the appropriate rate before paying the amount or credit. So section 206C 1H and section 194Q are one and the same. The only thing is, when the case of 206 1H, 206C 1H, it is at the time of receipt of money. Here, this 194Q, it is either credit or payment, whichever is earlier. So this is 194Q. So 194Q talks about resident seller. So here the section is applicable only when the seller is a resident. Okay, then we go into the threshold limit. What is the threshold limit for section 194Q? So section 194Q says the threshold limit is 50 lakhs. So only when the transaction value between the buyer and seller exceeds 50 lakhs, the particular transaction will be coming under the ambit of section 194Q. So any amount exceeding the amount of 50 lakhs will be tax deductible under section 194Q. Same way, the TDS rate is 0.1% on the value, aggregate value exceeding rupees 1 crore or 50 lakhs, and where the no PAN is available. So here section 206A gives benefit both for section 194O as well as 194Q. So the maximum rate is 5%. So since both 194Q as well as 206A operates in the same thing, so it is one is from the buyer's point of view, another is from the seller's point of view. So what happens is section 194Q clearly gives that where a transaction is not covered under any other tax deductible sections or any other TCS deductible collectible section other than section 206(1)(h). That is, where a transaction is tax deductible under any other provisions of this act, then 194Q will not be applicable. Same way, where a transaction is under the collection, TCS collection list, then in same cases, section 194Q will not apply. But there are cases where both section 194Q and 206C(1)(h) will be applicable. So in that case, section 194Q overrides section 206C(1)(h). So that is one thing. So it is wherever buyer, seller, especially when a seller has to collect a tax, the seller has to keep in mind that they have to get a declaration or a letter stating that the tax has to be deducted by the buyer. If the buyer is not liable under section 194Q, then it is the responsibility of the seller who has to collect the TCS form. So here what we'll do is this buyer, there is a condition for the buyer for whom it is applicable. So what it says is where in the preceding financial year in which the sale transaction is happening, if the buyer has more than 10 crores of turnover, only then the section 194Q is applicable to the buyer. So just move on to the. So I've just given this thing of comparison between 194Q and 206C(1)(h). So here it is applicable if the turnover of the buyer is more than 10 crores. Here the turnover of the seller is more than 10 crores, and the threshold limit is same for both. And the time of deduction or collection, you see, there is about I have already discussed. It is at the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier. But in case of 206(1)(c), it is at the time of receipt. So here, same, the rate of deduction is also the same. It is 0.1%. If you have a PAN, if there is no PAN, then it is 5%. So same in 206AB, wherein the maximum rate is 5%. So where the return has not been filed or where there is no PAN, then the rate is 5%. So here, who is the liability? The liability of deduction is buyer in case of 194Q and seller in case of 206C(1)(h). So these points I have actually explained you. The first thing is no TDS shall be deducted if it is covered under any other provisions of the TDS as well as the TCS, and where both TDS and TCS are applicable, then TDS will be the overriding thing compared to TCS, as well as for arriving at the value of this thing. So it is the gross value that is inclusive of GST only you have to take for the purpose of arriving at the reduction. This thing. Transaction value should be with inclusive of GST. In the previous case, I told you that transaction value should be excluding GST, but in here it is a gross value, so it has to take in both GST. So next thing is here this section talks about purchase of goods. So what is goods? Goods, you don't have a definition in Income Tax Act. So goods definition has been taken out either from the Constitution or from the Sale of Goods Act or from the GST, latest Goods and Service Act. So here goods, there are a lot of examples wherein the electricity is a goods. So there are a lot of case laws which says, and it has been proven in the this thing, that electricity is considered as goods. Even actionable claims, they are also goods. Though in Sale of Goods Act, actionable claims were not included as goods, but in the current Goods and Service Tax Act, actionable claims are also included in goods. So goods means it is movable. So all immovable properties such as land and building will not be considered as goods. So you have to take this one into consideration. And then, as I have rightly mentioned, that 194Q supersedes, that is overrides section 206(1)(h). And if the buyer deducts TDS under 194Q, then the seller need not deduct TCS under section 261H. But there will be cases because when it is purchase of goods, what happens is it is payment or credit whichever is earlier. But when it comes to 261H, it is collection. But due to business practice, most of the MNCs and big corporates, they have taken a stand to collect TCS at the time of issuing the invoice. So, before receiving the invoice itself, there will be cases where the TCS is collected on the invoice value. So, what happened with department came with a clarification stating that once for the transaction value, if TCS has been collected, then those transactions you need not deduct TDS on. So, you are not considered as an assessee in default in those cases. So, that is a separate department clarification on that. So, I just given an example. So, see where the first example is the buyer's turnover is 12 crores, the seller's turnover is 9 crores, the transaction value is 60 lakh. So, it has exceeded the threshold limit. Now, in this case, since anyway section 194Q overrides 260(1H, it is only 194Q TDS has to be deducted on the first transaction. So, if we take the second one, the buyer's turnover is 9 crores, the seller's turnover is 12 crores. The transaction value is 60 lakh. So, since it is exceeding the threshold limit, TCS or TDS is applicable. But in the given case, the buyer's turnover in the previous year is less than 10 crores. So, he is not liable to deduct TDS on this transaction. Since the buyer is not liable to deduct the TDS, you see the seller's turnover. Here, seller's turnover is 12 crores, which exceeds the limit. So, he is liable to collect TCS on this. So, even though 94Q overrides section 261H, here since the buyer has not deducted the TDS, it is the responsibility of the seller to collect TDS on it. The next example is where the buyer's turnover is 12 crores and the seller's turnover is 12 crores and the transaction value is 60 lakh. In this case, both are liable. So, the buyer is liable under 194Q, the seller is liable under section 261H. In this case, as I have already mentioned, 194Q overrides section 261H, hence it is applicable section is 194Q. And the fourth example is both the buyer and seller's turnover is 9 crores, the transaction value is 60 lakhs. Though the transaction value has exceeded the threshold limit, since both the buyer and seller are not liable, none of the TDS as well as TCS provision will be applicable. And in the last example, both the turnovers are 12 crores, so both are liable for deduction as well as collection, but the transaction value is 40 lakhs, so which is less than the threshold limit. Hence, there is no tax TCS as well as TDS liability. So, 194Q is one of the important sections which you have to do because there is a lot of manual and as well as the data volume will be more. So, each company has taken a different stand of how to document their process, as well as the collection of tax as well as the payment is also a challenge. Each company has their own way of doing it. Some they collect the taxes at the time of invoice itself. Few they go by the actual provision which says only when the receipt is more than the 50 lakhs they are liable to collect. So, but this will have a huge challenge in the 26 AS, which will create a lot of issues maybe in the future because based on the current income tax policy, it is basically they go based on the 26 AS. So what happens is there will be cases where the transaction will be more in as per the seller's book because they collected before, but the purchase might be happening in the next year. So that will be a case. So these things have to be taken care of. So then we will move on to the
couple of weeks before in the first control. Couple of weeks before we were conducting an outreach program in Chennai. Okay, wherein our deputy director has also posted. Fourth scenario, buyer's turnover is 9 crore. Seller turnover is 9 crore. No, fifth. Third.
Okay.
12 crore. 12 crore. And transaction value is 60 lakhs.
Yes.
Okay, in this case, my deputy director has told me that seller has collected tax.
Yes.
Not director has.
That's what I said. There is a CBDT circular which says where even before the buyer is able to deduct TDS, if the seller has collected the TCS, then buyer is absolved from his responsibility of deducting TDS. Go to the previous slide. I'll let you know the program. Previous slide. I'll get you that. It is there and that. Okay. Then next we'll move on to one of the most important amendments in Finance Act 2022. So this is a very old section which has now brought into life. Actually, this section is section 28 subsection 4, which was brought into the Income Tax Act way back in 1963. But what happens is, till now, none of them have thought about how to trace those things into the income tax radar. Now, the government has taken a very good initiative of bringing those people under this. So actually, what the section 28 subsection 4 says is, any value of perquisite or benefit received during the course of a business or profession is a business income. So the person who is receiving those value of benefit or perquisite has to disclose it in his income as an income for business or profession. But I don't think many of us would have done that, and even in my cases also, many of our clients might not have disclosed those details to us. But this section has now have been a huge revelation in this particular thing, which brings in many of the earlier income escape is now brought into tax. So what the section says is, the section says any benefit or perquisite, whether convertible into cash or not, is paid by a resident seller or a resident person to a resident provider of service, and if the threshold limit is more than 20,000, then TDS has to be deducted. So this is what the section says. So there are two threshold limits. One is the threshold limit of the value of benefit or perquisite, that is 20,000. Next is to whom this provision is applicable. So here this provision is applicable to everyone except for individuals and HUF, wherein if the individuals or HUF's turnover is less than 1 crore in the previous financial year, or 50 lakhs in case of profession in the previous financial year, then this section is not applicable to them. So only for those who are a tax audit case or whose income is more than 1 crore in case of business and 50 lakhs in case of profession, they are liable to deduct TDS under this provision. So what is the rate of tax? It is 10% of the value of benefit or perquisite given. So 10% is the TDS rate. Now we'll move on to the next thing. So we talk about what value or benefit. So how do you arrive at the value or benefit? So the valuation comes into play. So generally, value is the fair market value of the value of benefit provided. And then they are given two exceptions. See, all these have been captured from the latest department circular, which has given a clarification on the particular section, and it is a detailed one, so which I have captured in this presentation. So here, the fair market value of the benefit or where there are two exceptions to this, where we purchase a benefit or perquisite and then we give it to the service provider. In that case, what happens is the value of the benefit or perquisite is the purchase cost which we have incurred. Okay. Then what happens if we give a gift or something to whatever we have manufactured products to our clients or any dealer? What happens to that valuation? So here what happens is the section clearly mentions that, the department circular clearly mentions that the value for the purpose is the cost or the sale price which you will charge to an independent supplier, independent customer. So this is the valuation. In this 194R, GST should not be included. So GST should, you have to, the taxable value is the value which you have to take for the purpose of tax deduction. Next. So there are various FAQ questions thrown by the TBDT, as well as they have given replies to those questions. We'll go one by one. Is it necessary that a person providing the benefit or perquisite has to make sure that that income is chargeable to tax in the hands of the recipient? Is what the first question is. Here the department has clearly mentioned the taxability is not the criteria. When you provide any value of perquisite or a benefit given to a provider of service, then it is liable for TDS deduction. So you need not worry whether the income is taxable in the other person's hand. So that is one thing which you have to make sure. Next, what if the benefit or perquisite is in kind? So, benefit or perquisite, it can be in kind, it can be fully in cash, it can be partly in cash as well as partly in kind. So, there is no distinction in the part. Though the word value or perquisite is actually something which is not non-monetary. That is what a perquisite is. There is no actual cash outflow. But here, the perquisite includes both cash as well as in any kind. Then the third question is whether tax has to be deducted if the benefit or perquisite is in the form of capital asset. So, for an example, let us say there are cases where the commission agent, the developer of the sites, they might give some land as a this thing for the services done by them. So, in this case, though this land is a capital asset, as per this provision, it is liable for deduction under section 194. So, you need not worry about whether the asset is a capital asset or the revenue. Next. Then what happens? There are scenarios wherein, though there will be relationship between the service provider and the service recipient, but the benefit will be enjoyed by either the employees of the service provider, or maybe the relatives of the service provider, or maybe the directors of the service provider. So the benefit would be given to a different person, but in that cases, whether 194R is applicable for the this thing is we have to see. So this question has been given in the FAQ, and the department has clarified that. See, you have to see what is the substance over form. Why this particular benefit or purpose is given to a person? It is because of the relationship which he has with the service provider. Hence, the TDS reduction should be done in the service recipient's name and not on the person who has received the. So the director, irrespective of the director or an employee using the service, the provider of the value of benefit or purpose has to deduct tax on the recipient company only, not on the individuals. This one? This one. For example, a dealer, what will happen is, it might be a company will have a dealership with another company, wherein they provide ad tickets to the employees or maybe the marketing executives. So this marketing executive, the ticket will be in the name of the marketing executive. But actually speaking, since he is the employee of the provider of service, he is enjoying this benefit. So you need not deduct TDS on the employee name. The TDS actually be deducted on the company under whom the person is working as an employee. Same way, the example has actually broadened. It has given a specific example of hospitals, wherein if a person is an employee, if a doctor is employed in an hospital, and if some free samples or some benefits are given to the doctor, still the TDS deduction has to be done in the hospital's name and not on the doctor's name. The same way, where the doctor is a consultant in the hospital, then tax deduction should happen in the doctor's name and not on the hospital. So, is it okay? Then, what happens if we see what is tax deduction? Before paying him, he deducts something and then pay it to the government. What happens if I give the entire value of the benefit or purpose is in kind, or some part in cash, mostly in kind, wherein the cash part is not enough for the deduction percentage, 10%. Provider of service, they receive materials from the assessee for displaying those materials in the trade shows or display materials. So what happens to those materials which are given on display? So here what the department says is, wherever those materials are returned back to the assessee, in those cases it is not liable for TDS. And wherever it is retained by the dealer or the displayer, then in such cases TDS under section 194R is applicable. Next, whether section 194R is applicable to credits of benefit or purposes given to the employees, though this is not there in the FAQ, I have just added it. See, where there is a specific provision which governs a transaction, a general provision will not override the specific provision. So the only specific provision will override the general provision. So perquisites is covered under section 17(2). Hence, section 192B will be overriding section 194R. So in those cases, it is perquisite under 192B only tax deduction will occur. So 194R will not be applicable for benefit or perquisite given to an employee. Then what I have done is I have just given some illustrations in where section 194R is applicable in cases and where it is not applicable. So here the CBDT circular is very clear on the inclusions of 194R. So any incentive, whether it can be in the form of cash or kind, for example, PV, fridge, whatever you give, so all these incentives given will be covered under section 194R. The example which I gave for trip sponsor. So any trip sponsor, the trip sponsor amount, you have to deduct TDS on that. And then free tickets for the events. Free medicines given as sample. So where the doctor where free medicines are given for doctors, in those cases also 194R is applicable. Then reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses. This is somewhat the department has stretched the definition. So actually, even in GST, the reimbursement of expenditure is an issue wherein if the bills are not in the receiver's name, provider's name, then GST is applicable as per the GST law. Same way here, what they have done is when the out-of-pocket expenses claim, if the bills are not in the provider's name, then when they submit the bills, then we are liable to deduct TDS under section 194. Expense for leisure trip. So there will be cases where there will be a trade promotion event, and what will happen is before that event and after that event, they would have sponsored some tickets or some room. This thing will be sponsored to the dealers. So what it says is, though the event can be for your marketing activity, any leisure trip even or leisure expense incurred for leisure activity, then 194R is applicable on those contracts. Where very few cases the department has clarified that section 194R is not applicable. So one is sales discount, cash discount, rebate related to sales, any rebate on that. And then this example is very clear, free samples along with sales. So the department has specifically told this example should not be stretched for other cases. For example, let us take a FMCG customer. So what they do is they sell, let us take a chili powder packet, 100 packets, and they give 10 packets as free. In those cases, section 194R will not be applicable. But the same example, for 100 packets of chili, they give turmeric powder 50 packets. In those cases, 194R will be applicable if it is given as a discount free of cost. And then any benefit or purposes provided to a government entity which is not for a business purpose. So which does not carry out business operations. If that case, for example, is a government hospitals. In those cases, TDS under section 194R is not applicable. And this reimbursement, if the bill is in the provider's name, and then in that cases, TDS under section 194R is not applicable. That's all. Then we'll move on to this next new section which was brought in this Finance Act 22, section 194S, TDS on transfer of virtual digital assets. So here, till last year, this income was not chargeable to tax. Many of us didn't know how to offer this to tax. So government has come with a clarification and they brought in this new section of bringing the sale of digital as a virtual assets into the tax bracket. So to facilitate the tracing and tracking of those events, section 194S has been brought into book. So here the transaction is applicable to any person. Okay, but the seller should be a resident. So only when then company, LLP and other AOP, BOR. So in case of specified person, so what specified person is? Same definition as given in our 194Q or R, sorry. So here what happens is, a person, an individual or achiever, if his previous year turnover is less than 1 crore in case of business, or 50 lakhs in case of profession, or he does not have any business income. In those cases, the threshold limit is 50,000. So only when the sale value of the virtual currency is more than 50,000, TDS under section 194S is applicable. In any other case, it is 10,000. And tax deduction rate is 1%. See, volume-based incentive, there are two ways of doing it. The volume-based incentive can be given as a discount. If we give it as a discount, then 190. Sorry? Yeah. You can give both trade discount as well as cash discount. You can give it as a trade discount as well as a cash discount. You can raise a credit note on that, so that what happens is automatically the buyer's price also comes down, seller's income also comes down. There is an equal impact, and TDS is not applicable on 194.
94 or the reimbursement other than travel or lodge bill like that. I'm engaging your chartered accountant for filing various returns. In the process, you are filing that and paying many fees on the ROC and other things. That also I have to consider it.
Yes, sir. You have to see, but ROC fees as well as any tax fee which we remit on behalf of the assessee, that will not be considered because ROC will pay on behalf of them in their name.
No, bill will not come in my name because all you paid using your debit card or
No.
card.
It might be we might be using our debit card, but under whose name we are going to pay? So we will give your PAN number or your TAN number or your SIN number, then only we pay. So the invoice or the payment receipt will be generated in your name. In those cases, reimbursement will not be coming under 194R. Any travel reimbursements, some hotel expenses, out-of-pocket expenses which we incur and then which we claim from you, those transactions will be covered under 194R.
See, many times the bill will not come and the online payment will not ask who is paying or like that.
No, sir. You give me one example.
I will give one example. You are engaging a advocate for the checking the encumbrance certificate and other things. Encumbrance certificate, anybody can pay, anybody can take it.
Correct.
But for that, I am paying separate consulting fee for each transaction base. The bill will not come in my name.
Yes. Only in case of encumbrance certificate that issue is there. So the bill will not be in the name.
For example, court fee. The advocate will say that for filing of the suit, this is the fee.
No, sir,
It will
but
not come in.
no, if he provides the copy for that payment,
It will not come in the name.
no, but anyway, if you have entering into this thing case, then automatically you can substantiate it that it is only for the for our name and not in the name of the. So here, what happens is only those bills which are bills. It is not in all these cases. It is not bill. Okay, it is just a payment on your.
Correct.
Okay, so mostly in court and EC, this issue is there. In all other cases, tax and other things, you will receive the receipt in our name. So in that case, TDS will not be applicable. Even for the EC and the thing, once you are able to establish a connection between those two transactions, you can you need not deduct tax under the 194R. Yes.
Case of workers to employees, you have mentioned clearly that section 192B of supersedes 194R. So what about the case of consultants who are not on roads but regular in service?
Consultants, anyway, will be deducting tax under 194J, so they are not employees. So if 194J, that's what I'm saying. So this is not, this example will apply for anything. Where there is a specific provision,
Supersedes 194.
Yes, sir.
My name is Suraj. I may be wrong, just asking you. This is regarding section 194R. Today you're incurring a lot of expenditure to give this seminar. Okay, all the members are benefited, right? So, and probably they will give you business more. So, should you deduct the TDS?
Good question.
Even the income tax officials are there.
No. First thing is, I don't think that the value of benefit which I provide you is 20,000 or more. So that threshold limit is there.
Okay.
So even if it is more than threshold limit, let's better say, this is for the purpose of educating. There is a specific reference given in the FAQ that where the expense is incurred for educating our customer. In those cases, 194R is not applicable.
Let's assume it is more than 20K.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If it is an education, then this is where we educate our customer. Let us say you are my customer or you might be a dealer. If I educate you for this purpose, there is a conflict, then it is not liable for 190. They have clearly mentioned in their definition.
In a way, you're getting business. That's what I'm.
Correct. But still, we are. It is more like an advertisement now. That will not be it.
It's proposed that benefits given to the employee also to be considered as the income. How the company will offer as the income?
No. Where in case of employees, they will be charged as perquisites in their return. So while you prepare in the form 16, you will have allowances and then perquisites. So the value of perquisite will be added as their income. Generally, when employee is given a perquisite or a benefit, that income will be offered to his return, in his return.
But for 194R, the recipient should have business income.
No. Sir, I will explain this.
Yeah.
Sir, you are told some organization is giving benefit to the employee of another organization. That exceeding 20,000, they will direct TDS.
Right.
And whose name they will give? Company's name.
Company's name, yes.
How the company will offer that as income?
That's what I'm saying. They will offer that as a perquisite in the employee's book. So income will be transferred to the employee.
So on that salary TDS also we have
TDS has to be deducted.
No, salary TDS and salary also we have to apply.
So that will be added as a perquisite, and on that you have to deduct TDS under section 192.
So the company has to track the employee whatever availed benefit from all other employees.
So anyway, that responsibility is not with the company, no, it is with the whoever is providing.
How do I take as salary per se? I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not tracking. Then how do I take as salary?
You have to go with your 26 AS. Once that is displayed in your 26 AS, you have to check with the why that amount has been deducted. Based on that, then you have to.
So indirectly, company is not paying. The employee is paying from his salary.
Yeah. Whenever the benefit is enjoyed by the employee, in the end result, he is paying the tax.
Yes, to pay.
அனைவருக்கும் எங்களது மாலை நேர வணக்கத்தை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். நாங்கள் கேட்டுக்கொண்ட 48 மணி நேரத்துக்குள் இந்த டிடிஎஸ் அவேர்னஸ் புரோகிராமை மிக சிறந்த முறையில் எங்களுக்கு அமைத்து கொடுத்த திரு டிபி சீனிவாசன் அவர்களுக்கும் மற்றும் சுந்தரராமன் அவர்களுக்கும் எங்களுக்கு பல்வேறு செக்ஷன்களை சிறந்த முறையில் புரியும் வகையில் விளக்கிய பரத் அவர்களுக்கும் எங்களது டிடிஎஸ்ஸின் குடும்பத்தின் சார்பாக நாங்கள் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். மற்றும் ஜிஎல்எஸ்எஸ்ஐ சேர்ந்த திரு மகாலிங்கம் ஜானகி அவர்களுக்கும் எங்களது நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். எங்களது இந்த டிடிஎஸ் அவேர்னஸ் புரோகிராமை டெலிகாஸ்ட் செய்ய வந்திருக்கும் ஊடக நண்பர்கள் அவர்களுக்கும் எங்களது மனமார்ந்த நன்றியினை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம்.